Thank you guys for coming. There's so many of you. I didn't expect it like this, but this is great. So I'm Leticia, and I'm coming from an organization called GenSpace, based out of Sunset Park, Brooklyn. And this talks a little bit different because instead of coding and kind of doing things with computers and technology, our code and what we work with is DNA. And so we're an open access lab based out of Brooklyn. Basically, it works a lot of ways like a gym membership. You can pay for a membership, and you have access to the tools of synthetic biology. You can come use our office space, kind of like a co-working space. So BSL level 1, so level lab. So what we do is we work with organisms that are known to not have any kind of harmful effects to people with fully functioning, healthy immune systems. And so a little bit about us and our history is that we are the world's first community biology lab. And it's a new type of model in which we're rooted in our neighborhood. We hope that people come to us with questions, scientific questions, biological questions, rooted in open access, open source, and rooted in our neighborhood. Questions that are really relevant to people and what they're engaging in biologically. We first started in 2009. Essentially, our co-founder, Daniel Grushkin, he sent out a message on Meetup and said, if anyone's interested about talking about synthetic biology and all these new things that are happening, come meet me at this cafe. Ellen Jorgensen and Ray Bartai, an artist and a molecular biologist, responded to that call. And eventually they ended up in his Park Slope living room, which you can kind of see in that second picture there. And what they did was they invited all these people, journalists from the New York Times, other biologists, hobbyists, and what it showed is that there was a large interest in this. And so what they did was they DIY'd a bacterial transformation. Basically, what they did was they took a genetic snippet from a jellyfish that makes it fluoresce green and put it into an E. coli and strapped it onto someone at body temperature, which is what typically E. coli respond to, and they just made an E. coli glow green. And it was kind of the beginning of kind of this new curiosity and this new model for people engaging in transdisciplinary conversations with biology. Since 2009, there have been over 150 community biology labs pop up all over the world, basically meaning that there's a huge interest in the DIY movement and that the technologies to engage with synthetic biology are becoming cheaper and more accessible to everyone. Yearly, we meet at MIT for the Global Community Bio Summit, and it's been a way for us to organize ourselves and be able to share and create kind of a sense of community, but as well as a code of ethics. And so DIY Bio has been creating these kind of yearly gatherings in which we're kind of trying to think what DIY Bio needs, who has access, what are the things that we should consider, what are the risks, what are the ways in which we are challenging the status quo of biology, and so what are our values? And so a lot of these things, low cost, accessible, beneficial, where are we coming from? How do we all unite? Different really kind of familiar things to the coding world that are transferring over to the bio world. Something to narrow it down, one of my passion parts is biodesign, and the place in where the scientific discoveries that emerge can be translated, in which I think that it happens through design. A new perspective for future technologies and future design is that microbes are seen as factories. And so instead of mechanical production and kind of the imaginary of kind of the Industrial Revolution, what we envision creating the future are algae, bacteria, and yeast. So instead of gluing and welding, biodesign is looking to extrude, extract, and express from living organisms. So in the past, kind of the quintessential, I think, first biodesign or bio thing that everyone came into knowing about was insulin, in which an E. coli could then express insulin and we could produce it on a mass scale. Something that is, as kind of these technologies and these engagements with our health, kind of personalized medicine, how is biology going to affect me? We're kind of looking at things like E. coli or like a yogurt, or how is it going to become a consumer product? I really love this example by Daisy Ginsburg, It was an iGEM project, in which iGEM is kind of like this cool competition that a lot of people, high schoolers, colleges, community biology labs kind of compete to kind of have, who kind of comes up with like the best measurement or the best experiment. And this one won because it basically was a drinkable yogurt with a probiotic supplement so that you would process it, and depending on the colonies or the bacteria in your gut, you would then poop out that color and then know what was happening in your microbiome. And the imaginary of it is that this is something that you could go buy in your grocery store. It's seeing that you're no longer having to go to the doctor to do this, but that that synthetic biology and the inventions of the future will be kind of part of our regular and everyday lives. It's not quite a reality, but I think that we do see kind of the ways in which these technologies or these imaginaries are starting to kind of come into our daily lives. And so I'd like to introduce you a little bit to GenSpace and kind of who we are, just to kind of oscillate back between big picture, small picture with us. And so at GenSpace, we are students, teachers, immigrants, locals, retirees, PhDs, artists, designers, scientists, families, entrepreneurs, neighbors, travelers, experts, newbies, and hobbyists. We do a lot of programming because we think it's so important that everyone really have an access to these technologies and an access to understandable information. Not everyone can really interpret a scientific paper, but giving people the tools, giving high schoolers the tools and internships to engage with biologists and postdocs and create products together, create scientific experiments together is something that we value. We think that designers and people and artists need a space in order to engage with this, that it shouldn't just be ideological and maybe like constructed parallel realities, but that they could work together and reshape the industry in more sustainable or ethical ways. And then we do a lot of outreach to the local community to kind of reframe people's thinking that biology and biological questions are something kind of everyday, and that the lab isn't something that should be so distant or something that we should be skeptical of, but something that we can kind of reach and create ourselves. We kind of have this hope that we can be kind of like a local library in which kind of the tools and the questions that you have could be answered in our facility, but because it is something important that we are a physical space and not just some kind of an online system. We really do value the hands-on engagements that we do. And then we also create space for entrepreneurs. So we oscillate between the space of wanting people to develop products, and thus we let entrepreneurs work in our space and keep their IP. Where a lot of labs or have a very high cost of entry, we make sure that people can have a space to develop these kind of new industries and systems and be able to keep that and not have to pay such a high barrier to entry. We really want to make sure that barrier to entry is reduced as much as possible. And so to kind of give an overview of some biodesign basics, we really think that great discoveries are transformed through design into something that everyone can use. So the better the design, it's not about showing how complicated biology is, it's about showing how invisible and how permeable it is. I kind of broke it down into a who, what, when, where, why. So in the what and the why, we hope that we can kind of re-engage with the forms and functions of nature. We're really inspired by what is naturally occurring in nature and how can we kind of learn from it and go back to it rather than such a synthetic approach. We're really kind of engaging with natural colors and kind of variability. And looking at from a model of engineering, making sure that kind of taking these approaches, what changed in biology was that people could then see that microbes and DNA was something that we could almost map out like an electrical circuit. And if we could cut here and input a new code here, then the product would give us the output. And that kind of reframe, instead of naturally just kind of operating in its own way, really transformed that everyone could kind of engage and start to systematically alter biology. And then a sense of intervention, a concern with the sustainability of things. So maybe looking at repair and problem solving as opposed to kind of problem making or problem ignoring. So some examples of this, Suzanne Lee was kind of the pioneer in biodesign, in which she used kombucha leather. So if you ever drink kombucha at Whole Foods, it can kind of create a symbiotic culture bacteria in yeast. And that's kind of just something leather-like, so that you could make new coats or new fabrics that are just grown. So you no longer have to stitch and sew or create seams. You could just grow it into the shape or the form in which you wanted to. And as soon as you're done with it, you can kind of compost it rather than throwing it away. This is developed into a shirt that was developed at Modern Meadow. It was shown at the MoMA, in which this new collagen-based material is now kind of replacing leather. It creates the exact same kind of form and texture, but it even has more applications. Instead of just kind of being able to tan it, you can then spray leather and have similar effects. And there's other places to kind of explore with the possibilities. Another one more in terms of like structures is mycotexture. So Phil Ross created bricks out of the roots of mycelium. And so at MoMA PS1, they created this large structure that could hold up a whole kind of facade and yet still be composted. So you kind of watched it degrade as it spent its time in the MoMA PS1. Something about the what and why of biodesign. So it's more about being dynamic and critical. So we're looking to frame problems. What if, ask more what if questions as opposed to always solving. So it does have the counterpoint of problem finding. What are ethical questions and ways in which we engage with design that kind of are maybe not right? And how can a design provoke you and make you feel uncomfortable in that space? They're more communicative objects. And so it thinks about what the world could be. What is it if we imagine making a product now that really will exist in the future, and how will that guide us to a new invention? It's really about driving empathy for one of our fellow beings, be that human or non-human. And then it thinks about origins and where do we come from, who are we and what are we? And so in thinking about if we are our DNA, if we are our microbiome, I'm not as human as I thought I was. I'm kind of a conglomeration of hosts and little bacteria and things that live with me, within me, and affect my moods, who I am, how I am. And so it thinks a lot about kind of where do we come from, and like what is the material and what is us. If you see a strand of DNA, it's really quite inert. It's not the most interesting looking material. It's just clear fibers. But that is the code, and that is the material that foundationally makes us who we are. And so Christina Agapakis and Cecil Tolas, a perfumer and a scientist, came together and created human cheese. And so what happened is they took the cheese, they took the bacteria, they did swabs of famous people, the tears of, I want to say the tears of Oliver Eliasson, and like the kind of maybe a swab of the armpit of Hans Ulrich Obrist, the curator of the Serpentine Gallery in London. And they created cheese, so something that you could consume that came from a person, but it's really much more the bacteria. And it harkens back to kind of the original ways in which we made cheese, which wasn't so sterile. It was kind of blended in by your hands. You used your body, you used your physicality to do it. So these people's bacteria and microbiomes and all of whatever was happening, their hygiene, their habits, was incorporated into the products that we're eating. And is it really that we're eating human cheese, or is it just cheese now? Or is there some sort of kind of connection there? And then it also challenges our sense of like celebrity. Is there kind of a new commodity that once we can kind of split DNA and kind of get it kind of much more diffuse than what we thought, is there kind of a new commodity or a new way of engaging with celebrity and kind of commodification culture? And then kind of where and when. So there's the now, in which there are inventions that can intervene with a problem that we can address in the present. I see that plastic waste is a problem, and so I'm going to create a plastic-eating bacteria to solve that problem. And it engages with what do we know, what research is already out there, and what technologies are available to us. So I have this, and I can make that. And then there's the sense of the future, much more in the realm of speculative and critical design, in which we can think about 10, 100, and 1,000 years from now. We can challenge what are realistic expectations and create much more projections. We can move from the now into spaces of promise. We hope to not repeat utopian or dystopian narratives, but really kind of create a new type of imaginary and a new type of narrative. This one is much more in the realm of code, but Daisy Ginsburg recently at the Design Triennale at the Cooper Hewitt displayed The Substitute. And it engaged a little bit biologically. It was a sense of collaborations with nature, in which the rhino, the Sumatran rhino, he was still living at that point. And we were kind of seeing, like, what is this natural engagement with this rhino? They're still alive, but we know that we'll pass away, and so how do we preserve this, keep this like sense of the zoo, this kind of catalog of what is biological and living, and how do we kind of transfer these relationships? And so she created an algorithm in which you kind of engage with what this memory. And then the how. So we think a lot about research, engaging people to read magazines, scholarly articles, are the ways of kind of engaging with film. Sci-fi is a very big inspiration of our biodesigns. And then technical skills. So at GenSpace, we really hope that people come to us from where they're at, and we can build on the skills that they have and aim to get to the skills that they want. Be that with collaboration with a scientist. We also have kind of classes that we teach everyone. And then what it brings is, so we'll have everyone from like an opera singer to a retired, disillusioned biologist who left the lab because it was just too much of a repetitive motion, being a cog in the machine. Are there ways in which kind of we can create conversations in which new things could be invented, or we can share kind of ideas, and you'll realize that a lot more is in common than there is separate. And so membership at GenSpace is pretty open. So we have our scientists who are there to do kind of real discoveries. They're doing research, creating their organisms, making sure that, kind of doing some developmental early stage prototyping and research. But then we have Heather Judy Hadborg, so she's also kind of an alum from the ITP program, if I remember correctly. And her project was one of the first big ones out of GenSpace, in which she learned all of the synthetic biology techniques, extracting DNA, being able to kind of run sequencing on it. And what she did was she took DNA that people leave in public, be that like your hair that you leave, or if you smoked a cigarette and threw it, or chewed gum and left it on the street. She started collecting these forms of public DNA remnants and sequencing them. And what she did was she created face masks of people to kind of recreate what the DNA could potentially say that they looked like. This displayed in the MoMA as a very kind of provocative and ethical question. Like, should she even be allowed to sequence our DNA and make kind of a replica of me? But the science in what DNA does is you can't really tell what someone looks like from DNA. We believe it. We believe that you can, or that it's kind of this smaller fragment of who you are. Like, it's just this replica, or this counterpoint. But really it shows that when we input a lot of data, be it ethnic data, things that we assume, geographic, kind of psychogeographic data, we can get, a mask, but it shows much more about our own kind of judgments, predispositions, our own kind of, our own predispositions or ways of kind of stereotyping. And so that what was really great about this project was that she beat the technologists and people who were doing this in an industrial scale to sell it to police, to the technology. She beat them. And in displaying it at MoMA, which is a place of ethical debate, we were able to kind of have a conversation about this early. And so I think that that's an important thing about the dialogue and the ethical conversations and giving access, is that someone who has these questions can bring the technology to us early and put them in maybe a place that it should be, rather than immediately to market. More recently, we have had Catherine Hamilton. So she's from a group called Sister Sylvester. And her story is that she went to the Berliner Opera House. She was a big Bertolt Brecht fan. And it was the day after the Berliner Opera House closed. Bertolt Brecht he wrote the play Mother Courage, in which he had deliberate instructions that this hat that should be kind of as a critique of World War II and kind of the horrors of war, that part of the staging should not be, that it should be as awful and as dirty as war itself. So there was this hat that people had worn since, say, the 40s potentially, and it's never been washed, meaning that people left remnants of their DNA on this hat or she had that question. And so she found GenSpace and brought the hat to the lab, and eventually we ended up getting two people's DNA, which we've since named Herman and Carl. And in this play, she's kind of looking at a new form of theater that engages with biology, in which in reviving these two people's DNA with through E. coli, she's looking at transgenic theater. And so kind of, is there kind of a play that could happen in a petri dish? And here what you see is that she's extracted the DNA and put it into strawberries and made some absinthe drinks. So that we imbibe the DNA of these ancient characters, and the play happens in you. It happens in your gut, and you kind of become these characters in the play. Another way in which kind of GenSpace works is that artists and residents can visit, and a lot of labs, since they are very university oriented, there's no place to kind of work with your own bacteria. And so Yoko Shimizu came to us from Tokyo, and she was working on fungal typography to display at a local art show. And so she's kind of engaging with kind of a local fungus that is local to Japan, and making kind of new art and kind of typography with it. Something that's also kind of, as we spoke about a little bit with Suzanne, is looking at the ways in which our students from FIT can use these new methods as textiles. And so we've opened it up, and they've kind of been able to work with kombucha. So that's kind of what the SCOBY looks like before, and if there's other new applications or more ways of making this reproducible on a larger scale. And bioplastics, which is a new fun way, I think, of looking at the ways in which kind of plastic waste could be much more organic, easily disposable, and done in your kitchen. We had recently some students from NYU ITP come and try to make consumer electronics from bioplastics. And so looking at the ways in which biology can kind of be quite simple and quick to prototype with. We also like to engage with kind of more ancient as well as new techniques. And so this is an interesting class in which we take kind of old cochineal dyeing methods, in which you kind of crush up whole bugs and they reveal their colors, and you can use them for textile dyeing, and then combining that with bacterial dyeing techniques. So we'll teach people both crushing up bugs as well as kind of making E. coli produce new colors. Bioluminescence is also a very fun one. Taking the E. coli, putting E. coli in with a jellyfish sheet. So the gene that kind of makes them fluoresce in the sea. Putting that and being able to make kind of art projects with that. And then mycelium materials doing kind of, it's very soft material and it works as a glue. So if there's any way to kind of make hats or make clothing out of it, or frames, anything that you would kind of use as a brick, perhaps. And then slime mold. We have several ways of engaging with it. Slime mold's kind of hard to describe because it's not a fungus and it's not a bacteria. It's just like an interesting, smart organism that likes to eat oats. What's cool about it is that it knows the most effective way to get from food source to food source. And so there's been fun experiments in which subway maps have been replicated to see if they're effective, if a slime mold will change it. But then also having it, looking at your bacteria as a collaborator. When it has some sense of like intelligence or agency, is there any way that we can kind of collaborate with it and use it to storytell or to kind of co-form maybe a new map or a new system? And what is the most effective way in which you don't have to think about it, this little organism can maybe provide some insights. We have a lot of hobbyists, so there is a parallel with kind of making your own open source tools. And so we have a Gadgeteers community project. We work where instead of maybe like you might not know what you want to do yourself, and so you can join a community of people and work on a project together. So they make incubators open source for us instead of kind of, in which you can kind of scavenge what you need instead of buying the highly expensive lab equipment, and have something much more customized to what you need for your tools. The entrepreneurs, as I mentioned, a company called OpenTrons came out of GenSpace. instead of, so what they do is they make a manual pipetting machine. So they've automated pipetting. That way, kind of this task of like moving liquid to liquid can then be automated and much more precise through a robot. And they took the 3D printer as a model for that and have transformed it into a biological device. What was great about it is that it came out of Gen Space. They took one of our classes, and a computer scientist met a biologist, and together, like the task that this computer scientist kind of wasn't so great at pipetting at, and he thought it was kind of just a lame thing that humans had to do, could then kind of have this informal interaction, which created a whole new company, reducing the cost from $40,000 for an automated pipetting machine to $4,000. And then the project that I'm most excited about is Expressive Matter, as I'm selfishly the community project lead for it. I've hoped to create a new community for biodesigners to be able to prototype together, in which what our goal is to kind of take these biology-inspired techniques and facilitate kind of an avenue where people can engage with experts and engage with other people like-minded, where you're just kind of like hoping to just make stuff together and experiment with the materiality of things. What is an effective bioplastic, or how can I make this kind of much more like large scale, or even just function to begin with? Because so much of biology and working with natural things is that there's no kind of control to it. They are quite natural and very prone to warping and not functioning in the way in which normal plastics and the materials that we've used for so long do. And so it's a place for everyone to meet together, and we're hoping to create some more design projects and hopefully an exhibition, and engage more people into thinking about sustainability and thinking about working with more organic materials together. And so we meet every Thursday from 6 to 9. And so if you'd like to get to know more, you can definitely find us online. But thank you.
Could you tell me about the cool slime mold project you've done? I know a lot of people that do unconventional computing with slime molds. So like what's something that's more designy maybe that you might have seen someone doing in your lab?
So we had so the question was, what is something that we've done with slime mold that's more creative and design oriented? And so there was a storytelling, visual storytelling lab. No, not I don't remember, but it's slime tech lab. And what her and Ed designed, so it was Ashley Lewis and Ayo Sikunde, and they created a way of having the slime mold trigger a switch in which a story or a song that you would record would then be played by the slime mold. And so anytime it wanted to interact or trip the switch, it would then create a sound. And then another one our co-founder did in the Netherlands was he tried to see if people were as effective as a slime mold. And so he had the slime molds kind of do a race. He created it on a Petri dish and kind of mapped out. And humans had to, without their eyes, they could only sense through each other, had to go through kind of a park mapping the same way. And their reward, if they made it to the food source, was a beer. But it was kind of trying to see if humans could communicate with kind of without sense or vocalizing in the same way that a slime mold can. So finding other ways to communicate with your fellow people.
Sounds fun.
Yeah.
Sorry, I have another slime mold question. So I'm really interested in that as it pertains to like transportation modeling, and this kind of specific question, but is there, I know that there's a concept of like a food source and like the slime mold is trying to get to it. One, I'm just curious, like how do they know even what direction to start moving in? But then two, is there a concept of like a bigger or a smaller food source, or is it just binary, like this is a food source or it's not?
I think that is kind of like so the question was, how do slime molds know kind of where to go in terms of a food source, and if there's kind of a larger food source or more effective or food, a better food source to go to, how do they know which way they should go? And so the slime molds, it's a little strange because we don't totally understand their sensing mechanisms. But what they do is they kind of spread out as far as they can at first, and then once they kind of catch wind of something, so I don't know why they go, but once they kind of figured out there's some sort of signal that they are able to send to each other to say everyone should go this way, that food source or what we thought was over there is just not existent, it's not the thing. And what's interesting is that this is kind of also generationally passed, so they don't really they can reproduce on their own. And so you could take them into a different environment or a different kind of situation, and they'll remember things or kind of these maps, or they'll have like memories of kind of time sensitivity to it, or kind of like weather or environmental conditions that are transferred down. And so I think it's just a completely peculiar organism because we don't even know how to classify it in the kind of the genome or the whole tree of life. We don't know, is it a fungus, is it a bacteria, and why does it do these weird things? Like it seems smart. So it knows like if it's cold every 15 minutes to retract. And you could take it into, you could take a little chunk of it, have it reproduce, and those other new produced slime molds would know it's going to be cold in 15 minutes, so I should retract, even though they've never been exposed to those conditions. Yeah, it's a peculiar thing we're talking about.
I have a question. You mentioned that with GenSpace and the greater community that you've kind of developed your own bioethics kind of rules. How would GenSpace, or if they've ever had to, deal with either a member or someone in the community that might seem to violate or challenge some of those bioethic rules that you've set down?
Yeah. So we have our kind of core values. So I'll give the example of transparency as one. We hope that everyone is transparent about their research. So we don't want to know. We in no way want to keep someone's IP, and that would be kind of a reason why someone wants to keep something private. But we do insist that we have a lab manager that knows every chemical and organism that comes in. But when people want to be kind of resistant to that, it's not something typical for us. Because I think a lot of people are self-selecting in who wants to come into GenSpace. We do have to kind of see who we allow to engage in the space. Ways in which we deal with that is, I think that having our no claim on IP is also kind of the benefit, in which we say we really have no interest, we just want to make sure that you're safe, and that this is kind of a collaborative space. And then I'm trying to think of another example as to kind of something kind of questionable with the code of ethics. Fortunately, we haven't had too many of those. But more just kind of people want to keep things private sometimes that maybe are a little bit dangerous for themselves. And our concern is just really health and safety. Transparency is something that we want, not only just because of people kind of being safe, but also we hope that there's a belief in biology that knowledge should be kind of open and transferred and well documented. And so kind of these are values that we're hoping to instill.
Can you talk a little bit more about what bioplastic is?
Yeah. So bioplastic is just kind of plastic where instead of a petroleum-based source, we're looking for something natural. So that could be gelatin, meaning that it comes from the fat of, say, a cow or an animal, or cornstarch. And so the idea is that it's something that can very easily biodegrade, but creates that same, but becomes a polymer, so it has kind of the rigidity or kind of the flexible traits of a petroleum-based plastic.
Have you worked with it?
Very much, and it's a very frustrating material. It's very exciting. I think that some of the great opportunities of it, there's everything from kind of a bioplastic wall fixture that could hopefully take out pollutants in your room to kind of making some sort of glasses and cases. So there's been a lot of companies that are doing kind of replacing plastics with bioplastics, thinking everything from kind of glasses to glasses are the big one because large scale bioplastics often get moldy. Small scale ones you can kind of control a little bit more. I will add that the nice thing about bioplastics or a lot of biodesign things are the things that you can do at home in your kitchen. So like things like mycelium and kombucha or SCOBY and bioplastics, you can start. They're very great introductions to biodesign because they don't require kind of the health and safety regulations that working with an E. coli does. So I also kind of really pride those types of things that make sure that anyone kind of has access and kind of an informal learning.
Are the bioplastics more about sustainability, or are there things that you can like construct with bioplastics that you wouldn't be able to make otherwise?
I think they're much more of a provocation because they are still tied to cash crops or things that maybe aren't as healthy. You know, we don't want to be using more animals to make bioplastics. We don't want to necessarily be growing more corn because of the way in which it's farmed. So I think that it's a provocation in that it can challenge petroleum-based plastics, but I don't necessarily think of it as a solution, especially because they are so unstable and unusable on a large scale. So I'm kind of interested in maybe what a good bioplastic could look like, and I think that an early prototype and why it fails kind of evokes those questions and why it's a good thing to read. Love the question. I would welcome you all to go to genspace.org, our GenSpace website. There's a lot of ways to engage on kind of like easy things, so like our community projects, as well as kind of like some open nights. So we often have events where we share the work that we're doing in our labs, normally in May and in November, in which we'll present and kind of have drinks and cocktails. And on the 14th, we're going to be having a performance of the transgenic theater for Valentine's Day. So there's lots of places to engage and just have fun. It doesn't always have to be so work intensive. So if you have any questions, I'll be here after. Thank you guys so much.